good evening, and good night, Straight Talk viewers, wherever you might be. Once again, we are bringing to you a program, our weekly program, which we hope will be of interest to you. We know that the other programs have been very much of interest to you, and that is why we choose topics that we believe reflect Guyanese reality on the one hand, political developments in the country on the other, and matters which we believe would be of general interest to one and everyone of Guyana, all and everyone in Guyana and outside Guyana. This week, we have chosen a topic that I believe will follow a similar pattern like other topics. This has to do with an African proverb which says that when the elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. We will take this theme and put it in a political context. That is, this topic would be the elephants and the ants. When the elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. In other words, the weak gets hurt when the strong and powerful fight. How do we put this in a Guyanese context? And what significance does it have for the current political situation in our country? Let me begin by informing you that of recent, about 7 political parties have emerged on the political front. They have all declared that they will contest the upcoming elections. In other words, it will be 7 versus 2. And the 2, as we know, are the People's Progressive Party Civic and the APNU AFC. Let us, for the purpose of this discussion, call those 2 the elephants. And let us, for the purpose again of this discussion, call the 7 the ants. Now, this does not mean in any way to discredit or miniaturize the significance of the emergence of the 7 parties on the political scenario. In a democracy, it is quite understandable and in fact acceptable that political parties will mushroom in order to represent what they claim to be their constituents or the interests of one group or the other. But it's not only political parties that emerge in a democracy. Non-governmental organizations, social movements, and organizations of different hues and shades would emerge in such countries. Some would say, in those circumstances, let 1,000 flowers bloom. But at the end of the day, the flowers might bloom, but some might wither and disappear. So in the context of what is taking place in Guyana, we have elections to be held on March the 2nd, 2020. And that is with the hope that those elections are not postponed for one reason or the other. Because knowing the APNU AFC and their track record, especially since December 21st, 2019, we know them to be very shifty, meaning that they are not a party of principle. They do not stick to their words, and when they tell you walk, you had better run. So, there is this situation in the country where you have two major political entities against seven smaller entities that have emerged within recent times. Let us begin with the APNU AFC, one of the elephants. What has characterized this organization or this coalition since its emergence on the scene, and in fact, more recently, since it came to power in May of 2015, is a tremendous degree of misrule. They have misruled the country, and this is reflected in the economy and in the political and social life of Guyana. Much has been said about the way in which they have misruled Guyana. Tons of documents, statements, press conferences, and so forth have been released or formulated to explain the extent to which the APNU AFC has misruled the country. Next, since December or since March or May last year, this government has become extremely unpopular. And this unpopularity did not begin only since they came in government, but even before, having regard to the steps they took when the PPPC in Parliament was in a minority position, where they cut the budget and deprived many people, many individuals, many organizations of what they were entitled to over the years. But since assuming office in May of last year, of 2015, they have become, in a matter of 4 years, very unpopular. Now this is most interesting, because imagine a party being in power for just 4 years and has become so unpopular in the country that almost every single Guyanese would like to see the backs of the APNU AFC. Why is this so? Why have they and how have they become so unpopular in just 4 years? It all started after they had gotten into office, when they increased their salaries humongously, to the extent that people began to wonder if that is what they voted for. And when I say people, I refer to their own political supporters or their own party supporters. And that is the trend that continued over the years. In other words, instead of taking steps, instead of initiating measures that will bring relief to the suffering man and woman, to the poor class of people, what they have been doing is enriching themselves. More money, more land, more property, more perks, and so forth. And as this trend continued, what began to happen was that the elite was getting richer and the poor was getting poorer. So that at the end of the day, a growing degree of unpopularity spread across the country, and the people began to look forward to only one thing. And that one thing was elections and voting the APNU AFC out of office. So that, as I said, in these 4 years, this government has become so unpopular that the only thing that people want is an elections to see their backs. In the meantime, within recent times, serious challenges have emerged within the coalition. And one of the more recent challenges has to do with the question of who will be the prime ministerial candidate of the coalition. Now, one would have imagined, at least, that since the AFC was the party in the coalition that held the position of the prime ministership, that everything will be hunky-dory, and come 2020, or long before 2020, there ought not to be a problem, that the pattern will continue. But that was not to be. Because everyone knows, it's an open secret, that the kind of support that the AFC brought to the coalition in 2015 is no longer there. They have lost that support that they stole on the basis of lies and deception from the People's Progressive Party. Of course, there were some misgivings on the part of the People's Progressive Party, in the sense that there was some degree of intransigency, some degree of complacency, and so forth. And having been in the government for so many years, obviously people wanted a change, not knowing that the change that we voted for was one that would evaporate in less than 4 years. So the AFC thinking that life will go on as usual, meaning that in the same way that they nominated Nagamutu to be the prime ministerial candidate of the coalition in office, in the same way that just as they chose Ramjatan to be the prime ministerial candidate, he will accede to office as the prime minister of an AFC APNU government if, I emphasize the word if, they were to be re-elected to office. But here's the thing. While they were boasting and while they were in jollification about Ramjatan being the prime minister, my prime ministerial candidate of the AFC, and the logical successor to Mr. Nagamutu, Mr. Granger, the presidential candidate of the APNU, put his foot down and said, look, you guys are free to make your nominations. Don't only give me one nominee. Give me more than one nominee. And by the way, he may have told them, give me some names that are not unacceptable to me. Do those words ring a bell? Give me names that are not unacceptable to me. One would hardly doubt that this is possible, that Mr. Granger would have told the AFC precisely those words. And he went even further to tell them that, look, you guys are free. You are free to make your nominations, but I will choose. How does that sound? You are free to make your nominations, but I will make the choice. The choice of the Prime Minister is with the President. So you see, the matter is not really settled. It is, as the old people would say, still like Gongzi sugar water, not settled. And so while the AFC and the Ramjatan and the others in the party might be basking in the sunshine of 2015, believing that their candidate will run through without any problems, will have a free ride without any problems, they have failed to recognize, or they live in this bubble believing that they have the same kind of support, or they brought the same kind of support that they brought in 2015. The APNU have not bought that one. They have not bought that one. Because, like everyone else, they know that the kind of support that the AFC had in 2015, which they brought to the coalition, they do not have that now. It's all gone back to the PPP. So how can you not have the kind of support that you had in 2015? How can you be unable to bring the kind of support that you brought to the coalition in 2015 and still expect to get this high-profile job? Well, the APNU has it differently. And like I said, Mr. Granger has put his foot down and said, give me nominees and I will choose. You put up names and I will choose. I will make the choice. Notwithstanding the precedent of what took place in 2015, which was a totally different scenario, completely different scenario. Now we are in a completely different scenario again. At that time they had support. This time around they do not have the kind of support. And here's the thing. The APNU is of the belief that they are now riding the crest of popularity, when this is clearly not the case. Let me make this point very clear. It's not the AFC per se that people want to see the backs of. Yes, they do want to see the backs of the AFC, but not the AFC alone. Because the AFC alone was not in the government. The AFC was part of the APNU-AFC coalition administration. And so people do not make a distinction between the APNU and the AFC. They see them as one cabal that's in the government that is messing up this country. And so it's not that the people want to see the backs of the AFC by itself. What the people want to see is the backs of the APNU-AFC coalition government that has brought total disaster to Guyana. And so if the APNU is of the belief that they can do it without the AFC, as they've told the AFC, and that they alone can win elections, and if the AFC is of the belief that they still have the kind of support that they had in 2015, well, we wish them good luck. But in wishing them good luck, we know that in a free and fair elections, the coalition as a whole, not APNU as distinct from AFC, the two peas in one pod, is what will be rejected by the electorate. So my friends, let us keep tuned or stay tuned to further developments while this battle internally continues. We understand that the AFC has made proposals to even reduce the number of seats that they would have in Parliament, and even reduce the number of ministries that they would want to have control over, in order as a concession to retain this position of prime ministership. So you know what that means. As the old people would say once again, they're cutting their nose to spoil their face. That's what it is. The moment they begin to concede ministerial portfolios and seats in the National Assembly, they are recognizing and admitting that they are much weaker than they were in 2015. And so, if the only apple of their eye is the prime ministership, and they prepared to concede many other privileges that they had before, then by virtue of their own confession and admittance, they were as weak as they possibly can. And that is precisely what the APNU have recognized. So that is insofar as the one of the elephants is concerned. That is the APNU AFC. Let's look at the PPP. The People's Progressive Party is in an alliance with the what is called the civic component. Civic component is made up of individuals who are not card-bearing members of the PPP. They are not members of the PPP, but they empathize with the aims, with the policies of the party. They do not enter into any big public debate or criticisms of the programs and the policies of the PPP. In fact, they work harmoniously with the party. And this civic component was established quite some time ago, ever since the days of Dr. Chetty Jagger. He was the one who has always fought and sought alliances with like-minded individuals, organizations, or political parties. So that he left in place the PPP Civic, intending it to be, as long as possibly can, a lasting alliance between the two entities. It has endured from 1992 to present. The PPP Civic Alliance has endured. And I have no doubt that come 2020, it will further solidify and move on. So that the PPP is in alliance, but not in a coalition, with individuals known as the civic component. Unlike the APNU AFC, which is in a coalition, and where the AFC has been called upon by the President to make nominations for the Prime Minister walk, so to speak. And by the way, we noticed that Mr. Ramjatan, I'll divert a little here just to make this comment. We have a Muslim holiday coming up soon. And the usual notification of the public holiday was issued to the public in the media. But my friends, it has so many errors that it's amazing. One has to ask the question, what is going on in that ministry? Is the minister so blind that he cannot see the errors in a document he's issuing in the public? Does he not recognize that this is going to bring the ministry and himself into disrepute? How can a man want to be the Prime Minister of this country and issues a simple document like that, riddled with so many errors? It is most shameful and disgraceful to our country. Children in school must be laughing at what is happening in this regard. So let us return to the PPP, the other elephant in the room. As I said, the PPP is in alliance with the civic component. But unlike the APNU AFC, where one of the coalition partners is called upon to nominate the Prime Ministerial candidate, this is not the case with the PPPC. It is not the civic component that nominates to the PPP a Prime Ministerial candidate. In fact, the PPP, after consulting within its ranks and at the leadership level, and of course in talking to one or two individuals in the civic component, they would name a person to be the prime ministerial candidate along with the presidential candidate of the party, whom we all know is Irfan Ali. So the civic component is usually allocated in the alliance of the PVPC, the prime ministerial candidate. We had that with Mr. Sam Hines, who was the prime ministerial candidate and the prime minister of this country for many years. In 2015, we had Ms. Elizabeth Harper, a consummate diplomat, who was nominated and accepted the nomination to be the prime ministerial candidate. This time around, the PVP is yet to identify its prime ministerial candidate. So the two major parties, PVPC and APNU-AFC, have not as yet, up to this point in time, not named their prime ministerial candidate. But I should emphasize, the process used by each of these two major parties are completely different. So there is precedence in the PVP for naming its prime ministerial candidate, but there's no precedent in the APNU-AFC for naming its prime ministerial candidate. So for the APNU-AFC, this time would not be a long time. This time around will be completely different. So the APNU-AFC and the PVPC are the two elephants that will be competing, or it is the 7 small political parties, which we call the ants, that will be competing with the two elephants as they contest the elections. Now, people have been asking, what are the aims of these small political parties? What are they aiming for? What do they represent? And the more popular question is, which of them will end up badly injured or dead in the water? Of course, the last question is merely speculative. We will have to wait until the results of the elections are announced in order to understand and appreciate what has actually happened. But the two questions about what are these 7 parties aiming for, what do they hope to achieve, and who they represent are quite relevant at this point in time for discussion. They are aiming for, as they themselves have proclaimed, to be, if possible, the third force in the political or the body politic of the country. And by extension of that argument, they are also hoping to have a number of seats in the National Assembly that would hold the balance of power, so to speak, between the two major political parties. Would that happen? Again, that is speculative, because as the voters go to put their ballot papers in the boxes, we have to wait until those votes are counted fairly and freely in order to appreciate the outcome. But fundamentally speaking, they have said that what they're hoping for is to strike the balance between the PVPC and the APNU-AFC. In other words, that no decision should be taken in the Parliament unless they have the support. That is to say, unless either of the two parties, whichever one wins, has the support of these 1, 2, or 3 smaller parties who may have representation in the parliament in order to hold the balance. Now, what do they represent? They represent different classes and different strata in the population. At least so they claim. The country is made up of all kinds of people from different walks of life, with different beliefs, different convictions. And they are hoping, that is to say, the smaller parties are hoping that they will, in the course of their campaign, be able to attract some of these voters to their parties. Will that happen? Again, another speculation. Nothing is guaranteed. But they are hoping that this is what will happen. These these 7 organizations are also hoping that they will take votes either from the PPP or the PNC or the APNU-AFC, or as they claim, votes that are floating out there undecided, to make up enough numbers for them to have enough seats in the National Assembly. Let us recall that in 1992 there were 11 other parties other than the PPP and the PNC. In 1993 there were 10 smaller parties. In 2001 there were 8 of these small parties. In 2006 there were 6 of these parties. And in 2011 there were 4 of these parties. And finally in 2015 there were 6 of them. So you would notice the pattern. They've always been small political parties on the electoral periphery, hoping to make a dent on long established patterns where the PPPC and the PPP and the PNC, now APNU-AFC, have held the majority of votes. In 1992, as I said, there were 11 of them. And if we look at what transpired between 1992 and 2011, it was the PPPC that defeated every single one of those parties, including its major rival, the PNC. And that is very significant. That is extremely significant. I repeat that. From 1992 to 2011, it was the PPPC alone that defeated all the other smaller parties, including the PNC, at elections. And how did they do that? Because those elections were free and fair. It also did that on the basis of its track record in the economy, on the social front, and on the political front. The delivery of goods and services for the people. And now that we have 7 parties, along with the APNU-AFC making 8, this is what the PPPC is coming up against. Tremendous battle. Going to be very strong and difficult fight. And that is why many people are calling this fight that is coming up the mother of all elections. To me, it doesn't matter whether it's the mother or the father, or the child, or the grandchild, or the stepchild. What is important is that you have the PPP coming up against 8 political parties in 2020. 7 smaller ones, and maybe there may be others, who knows? But right now, as we speak, it's 7 plus the APNU-AFC versus the PPPC. Now, let us remember that the People's Progressive Party is, in this case I would use mother, the PPP, People's Progressive Party, is the mother of all political parties in this, of most of the political parties in this country. Most of the political parties that have been formed out of the PPPC came as a result of them being incubated in the PPP, starting with the PNC. And in the other cases, there were individuals who were in the PPPC who left, broke away, and set up their own political party. Now, the PPP has a very impressive track record. The PPP is the party that has been fighting for free and fair elections since 1968, when the PNC began to rig elections. The party has been fighting for democracy and free and fair elections. It is today engaged in that fight. Why? Because the APNU-AFC is seeking, by devious means, to commit fraud in the upcoming elections. And we have to be careful that the gains that were made in the fight for free and fair elections, in electoral reforms and constitutional reforms, are not reversed as a result of the underhand tactics being utilized by the APNU-AFC at this point in time. So the contest for free and fair elections between all the political parties is something that we need to examine very closely. Because when we look at the present situation and who is carrying the fight, it is mainly the PPPC that is doing the heavy lifting, so to speak. The APNU-AFC pretends that they are fighting for free and fair elections and they want free and fair elections. But the truth is, do they? Or are they using that as a cover to carry out their nefarious means to rig the elections? And so they will say, but you know, we were also involved in this fight for free and fair elections. And we have nothing to do with the rigging. Just in the same way as they've been pretending upholding the Constitution. While all along the way since March 2015, or since March 2019, they have been seeking all different ways and means of outmaneuvering the courts and the Constitution. So my friends, this is the point at which we are at today. We, PPPC, are engaged in a fight for free and fair elections. And by the way, that fight for free and fair elections will benefit everybody. All 7 of the small political parties will benefit from the fight for free and fair elections. So, in fact, objectively speaking, the PPPC is fighting on their behalf. We are fighting in the PPPC on their behalf because they will eventually end up as a beneficiary of free and fair elections, which they have not, up to this point in time, been doing any of the heavy lifting for elections that could be free and fair. But that doesn't really matter. What matters is that a fight led by the PPP is taking place on the electoral front for free and fair elections. And that is a national task. That is a national task. That is a task that is for the benefit of the entire nation. And so when we say that the PPP is a national party, we do not mean national only in terms of where its membership are, or where its membership is, in all 10 regions. When we speak about being a national party, we talk about the issues and the interests political and otherwise, that are advanced by the PPP, that are of a national character. So on the one hand, you're national based on your representation and your membership across the country, but at the same time you're national based on your program and policies and the issues that you fight for, such as free and fair elections on behalf of the nation and the entire people of Guyana. So this track record is extremely important, and it is my belief that with this track record, with this national approach, with this fighting spirit, that the PPPC will defeat, as it did, beginning from 1992 to 2015, even though some people claim that those elections were free and fair, but you know there was some hanky-panky business there too. And so as long as the party continues on this path of fighting for the national interests of the country, fighting for free and fair elections and national democracy, in other words, democracy at the national level, it is an inevitability that the PPPC could come out triumphant in the next elections, and that the others who are lining up, so to speak, at the tips would benefit from this fight. To what extent they will benefit, that depends on the electorate. But like I said, the history of smaller parties contesting elections is one where some either end up badly wounded or dead in the water. And that is a matter for the electorate to decide. The people going to the polls make that decision. Let us, my friends, continue fighting, struggling, wherever we might be, in whatever way we can. And as I said in the previous Straight Talk program, we all cannot contribute in the same way. We can contribute in small ways, in medium ways, and in big ways. But whatever way we can contribute, let us make that contribution to make sure that Guyana does not return to the dark past. And when I say dark, I'm not referring to anybody's color or any race or anything like that. I'm referring to the atmosphere, the political atmosphere that prevailed in those days. Let us exercise our votes, and as I said before, let our conscience be our guide as we move towards 2020 to elect a new government, to bring about once again the dawn of a new era with the PPPC and all the progressive and democratic forces in one umbrella, so that people in this country could once again live a peaceful, prosperous, and progressive life. Thank you for listening, and let us meet once again next week for another Straight Talk. Thank you.